path of truth! Don't allow intruders in my... My data!
Alright, so today I'm going to be showing you guys a pretty decent build. So we're looking at the AA12 or ACS-12 corrosion, and I'm going to be running a critical build. It works really well as a critical build. It also works really well as an elemental status build. And surprisingly, it's a really good weak spot build as well. If you can run up to the boss and dump a mag into their face, it'll melt them really quick if you do it that way. But we're doing critical here. So for critical, I got for my calibration, I got rapid shot style, and I got double critical damage. And the reason for that is because you'll see I have plenty of critical rate due to the gear and all that, and I really just need more damage as it stands. And then the rapid shot is nice because the extra fire rate means more procs for the power surge. And I find that like the heavy style and the other ones, yeah, they're nice, but that extra fire rate, man, that's what makes or breaks this weapon in my opinion. And for the weapon features, we are going to be doing a crit build, but we are going to be running a little bit off of the power surge. That's like where we get a lot of our damage. And so you could do like a split build and focus like half of your damage into status, elemental, and the other half into like critical or weak spot, or not weak spot, weapon damage. You could do a weak spot build too, that's another one I've done, but I just run crit because the power surge, as it says there, can crit, so you can get critical of the elemental, and if you're running all crit, I'm pretty sure that stacks with it because it definitely looks like it's dealing more damage. And so we got 70% trigger for power surge, we got power surge can crit, yep. And then power surge crit rate plus 15%, power surge is triggered, power surge crit damage plus 15% for 6 seconds, effect can stack up to 10 times. So that's like, what, 150% more damage for 6 seconds if you get enough crits back to back to back, or power surge is triggered, I mean. And then the power surge damage factor plus 15% overall, so that's pretty good. Now for the sidearm, you can honestly use whatever, but in my opinion, the better ones are to either use like the crossbow, the wildfire, the Bingo or the Doombringer. That way you can get that extra damage from extra critical with the crossbow, and then extra damage via vulnerability from the bullseye, which is what I usually run. And that's always good, more damage. And then for the melee, I mean, you could do like an axe and stack some Fortress Warfare or something, or Fast Gunner or whatever. But I just am running Elemental Electric. My gun is, so I'm just gonna run that. Okay, so here's the important part for sure, the gear. So with the hood, you can use the Mayflag goggles. Those are really good. I definitely do like them. They power surge minus 30% damage, but when you take into consideration it's doing double the trigger count of the elemental power surge effect, you know, it's like an extra double damage, you know, so an extra twice as much damage minus 30%, you know, you're losing a third, but you're gaining like, you know, almost twice as much, so that's pretty good in my opinion. The only thing I don't prefer about the goggles is some bosses and enemies are completely immune to elemental effects. And so if you stack this build purely elemental status damage, it'll be really strong, and it'll wipe everything very fast, don't get me wrong. But the versatility gets screwed there, because the moment you go up against, like, I don't know, I think Siren is immune to like elementals, I can't remember. But the moment you go up against like an elemental immune boss, you're going to be hitting some real low damage. That's going to be your kryptonite, your weakness. And that is the reason why I focus on more of a crit build, and I just take the extra power surge damage based upon the crit rate that I'm stacking, and then passives on the mods. So I usually go with the gas mask hood because after triggering power surge, you get an extra crit rate plus 35% for 3 seconds, and with the AA12, you're pretty much triggering power surge every single shell that you fire off, and you have 5 pellets per shell, so that's like, you know, 5 times the chance of triggering power surge with each pull of the trigger. And your crit rate, my crit rate right now is already, with all this, is 27 resting, but that's without my gun pulled out. So here's with it pulled out. Now I'm at 35. Now if I start shooting and stacking my lone wolf stacks, and also stacking this, it goes all the way up to 70. So that plus 35% crit rate is insane. Like, look at that, all orange. You get like 2 or 3 white ones every now and then, but pretty much all orange. Like, that is pretty good for, okay. And then, so yeah, your crit rate will go up as you're passively shooting. And then your mask, or your hood, my bad. So for the hood, I use the gas mask hood because of that power surge crit rate. And then for the mod, well, we'll talk mods in a second. Okay, so then I use the Bastille mask because for my last slot of armor that can't be like mix and matched, or that can be mix and matched. That's not like, I'm not going for the set. So I got the extra 10% damage when HP is above 70%. And then for my set that I'm running, the 4 out of 4, I'm using Lone Wolf. I'm using the gloves, the boots, the pants, jacket. And then I have my one key fragment armor is the hood for that power surge and the crit. And then, yeah, the Bastille is the straggler. So for the mods, we'll start with the hood. For the mods, I'm running the Fateful Strike mod. Because again, I'm going for maximum crit. Max crit. But you can't deal weak spot damage, but I still shoot the hell out of their weak spot because you can still get bonuses like bonus damage stacks for hitting weak spots with certain mods and cradles. And I find that you still do like more damage consistently if you're sitting there shooting at like their thoracic region, so like where center mass meets the head basically, your upper torso, and then recoil into the head, and you'll still get like probably the most damage doing that. And then for the mask, the Bastille mask, I'm running first electrocution. And back to this mod, Fateful Strike is awesome and all, but you can also get away with elemental havoc, so elemental damage because of that energy. That's what we're running. So if you have like a very strong elemental status substats mod for the elemental havoc, that's a good one. And then of course I'm doing all crits, so I run Fateful Strike. You can also run like the Deviation Expert is a very good one to run for the AA12, especially if you're going mainly status damage, elemental damage, because you get that 20% extra status damage. Now it does reduce your range, and the AA12 kind of sucks a little bit with range as it is, besides its status damage. If you proc energy surge or power surge, it has like no range fall off, so you can be doing like 15,000 damage, and essentially you can snipe people with this gun. If you can get it to reach so far and you still have that proc chance, you'll just kill them with the energy surge damage. So I wouldn't worry about the range too much. The only time I would worry about the range is if it's completely not registering hit markers at a certain distance, then maybe switch this one out, but otherwise this one is very good for that too if you're not running just a straight critical build like me and you're running status. Otherwise I'd do this one for sure. Okay, I'm rambling, so next one. So first electrocution. This is another one where you can kind of swap it out and it'll be okay. I do prefer this one ultimately though. I think this one is like, in my opinion, the best just because for enemies without power surge status, it's power surge ultimate damage plus 30%, and since our gun is very conditional in that sense, and it actually does not apply the power surge status, it only applies the power surge damage. That works really well in our favor because everything's going to be taking plus 30% power surge damage, essentially. So if it's not getting procced with the surge status, it has that potential to take that extra 30% once the power surge damage procs, but the status will not happen to them. And so I like first electrocution for that reason, and then obviously crit, and then whatever good substats you have. But you can always swap this one out for another electrical one. Like, I wouldn't recommend Thunderclap on the AA12 because it doesn't shoot fast enough to get the most damage from that. That's more for like the outer space or the outsider build, the MP7 or SCAR. But you could use that, but that's more for like the automatic energy weapons. So for this one, you definitely are going to want to run with first electrocution. And then for the jacket, I know it sounds crazy having a blue mod. I actually use a lot of builds with blue mods because you can actually get more damage out of it if that's your most important thing. So like I'll use like one of these gold ones, and basically the gold chest mods are all gonna help you with like survivability. So like this one, if like you're being like poisoned or on fire or something or whatever, once you get 60% health and you hit that threshold and are going below it, it'll automatically take all of those lingering negative debuffs off of you. And then like this one is like it gives you shields every so many seconds when you're not in combat. And this one is like your head is no longer a weak spot. So all of these are like, and this one is like a vampire one that's like when you're above 6% health, you gain 15% lost health points for each kill, which is really nice. If you're doing like a tank build or something, you can just sit there and basically never die as long as you have ads to kill. and you're tanky enough to take big boss damage blows. But going back to the blue, the reason why I'm doing blue is because you get more damage, because none of these are like saying like extra crit damage or extra weak spot damage unless it's that one substat, which in my opinion just isn't enough. Where I can go here to an old blue universal one, which is the cutoff. Purple is like armor specific, blue isn't, so I always scrap all my purples and save all my golds and blues. But for the blue, I'm running the crit one, the crit damage enhancement, and that's your crit rate plus 2%, crit damage plus 12%, and then I have the substat crit damage plus 9 and magazine capacity. If I had a damage one instead of magazine capacity, that would ultimately be better, but this works really well in another build I have running that does well with the bigger capacity, and it's also a crit build. And then for the pants, I got Deadshot, and that's each crit hit by non-melee weapons grants plus 5% crit damage up to 45%. This effect is removed upon the next reload. And then for the substats, obviously I'm looking for crit, so I got gold crit. The rest of it, not so much of importance, but it's still definitely important to try your luck and get better ones, damage ones potentially. And then also, you can swap this one out too. You could use like, you know, reload rampage, refill 2 bullets, so that's 2 shells of the shoddy. Plus you get weapon damage and status damage plus 10%, but that's more conditional, whereas like with this one, you know, it's every hit you get, it's going to be adding crit damage up to 45%, which is pretty insanely strong for a crit build. And like with this, it's like just 10% weapon and status damage. And like same here, weak spot damage for 50% just for the first 3 hits. Melee one, I don't ever use melee, but to each their own. Yeah, so that's the ideal one for this one, because you can never have enough crit rate and damage. Well, I mean, I guess you could, but hey, I like more. And then for this one, this is just a gold version of those gloves that I have. And that's because the glove mod has the gold version of that, but the universal version of this, the blue. So, and then for this one, you can use the one I have going on, which is extra crit, the crit amplifier, so that's 10% rate, 15% damage, and then substat 15% crit, and the rest of those, they matter a lot, but they're not like the most importance. The main mod attribute and then the main core effect are like the 2 most important in my opinion. And instead of this one, you could always run, if you're focusing on that status damage, you could run like this one if you were using like the status enhancement. You could run this one if you were doing like the outer space build or the outsider build. But for the AA12, since it's not actually doing the status, it's just proccing its elemental ultimate damage, the energy surge damage, I run with crit because, you know, pretty self-explanatory. And then you could also run this too, crit rate plus 15%, but man, I mean, for just 5% less, you get an extra 15% damage, and you already have a bunch, so that's not worth it in my opinion. In my opinion, critical amplifier is the best for the gloves for this. And then for the shoes, I'm using covered advance. And the reason why I'm using covered advance is because taking no damage within 4 seconds grants 20% melee weapon and status damage for 30 seconds. The effect resets when the duration ends. Now that's pretty powerful because you only have to take no damage for 4 seconds and then you have 20% overall damage boosted basically for 30 seconds, and you just have to wait 4 seconds without getting hit each time you want that to run, which is pretty autonomous and pretty no-brainer, pretty nice. So I like covered advance for that one. If you're a bullet siphon build, then something like this would be good, but not for this purpose. Okay, so that's all of like the weapons and the calibrations. You could see those. I got rapid shot, double crit rate on the pistol. I got rapid shots, double crit damage on the shoddy. On this one, none of that matters. I haven't even calibrated that. And then for the mimetic cradle, Okay, so you can mix and match a lot of this stuff too, as you feel. So for the AA12 critical build, I like to run handgun enhancement because that also goes for shotguns. If you read it, damage plus 20% when holding pistols or shotguns, and you reload 1 ammo each time you defeat an enemy. So 20% damage, a little bit of ammo, passive reload, that's pretty good. Master Tactician, that's a very good one, but it's very tedious. You have to use a tactical item like robotics or grenades or something in order for this to work. So basically what I'll do is I'll just have like a stack of grenades or like turrets mounted on my hotbar, and I'll press the hotkey for it real quick, and I have it so it's auto throw in the settings. And so I'll press the key for that, and then I'll switch back to my weapon, or I'll roll to cancel it, and then it procs that, and then I can just keep shooting, and I have extra 25% damage against bosses for 15 seconds, which is nice. The deviation one is really nice because that's an extra 25% against bosses and elites when your deviation is active. And then tactical combo, I mean, that's pretty good. You know, it's extra 25% weapon damage for 4 seconds just by reloading or switching your weapon, and you can just spam that as you're fighting. I usually switch weapons every few shots to activate bullseye or something anyways. Status enhancement for sure, because after hitting a weak spot, status damage plus 25% for 3 seconds. Now that will help with the bullseye and with energy surge. So if you're using, you know, going for that surge damage or that vulnerability damage, and then and I'm not sure if that applies to the ultimate damage for that, or if that's just if they have like the lingering surge effect. And if that's the case, then the AA12 wouldn't benefit from this a whole lot. But if you're running like, you know, a bullseye weapon or like one of the other energy weapons that can apply that, it's always good to have this on. And then the first round blast is really good because, you know, after reloading, that's just another extra 25% damage, and that's for the power surge, 25%. And then that transient impact. So this is a seasonal one. I'm playing on a elemental hard server, and so you get this extra couple layers of new cradles. And for this one, it's a buff to the Power Surge Elemental, so an extra 25% damage for 18% and 18% Elemental for 15 seconds after defeating an enemy. So that's really good actually, and that's 18 or 15 seconds. So that's like kind of, you don't have to worry about that so much. Each time you kill someone with your AA12, it's most likely going to be, it'll be pretty simple. It's not like you have to sit there and swap weapons or think about it. It's just going to be automatically proccing after you're eliminating enemies, and that's 15 seconds. That's a good amount of time. And for the bounty hunter, I mean, that's a pretty good no-brainer if you're running something like the Wildfire or the Bingo or the Doombringer for your secondary. Because then you just run into a room, mark a couple targets or one target, and then swap weapons, unload, clear everything out, and boom, extra 25% and extra 35% for 15 seconds. So that's mad stacking of the damage. And now for this one, Advantage Barrier. Hitting a weak spot or reloading grants a shield of 30% of max health. Weapon damage reduction plus 15% while that's going. So that's really powerful, especially if you're like in a Rosetta dungeon or something, and there's like a bunch of turrets shooting you, sentries, drones, Rosetta heavies and stuff. That'll help a lot, especially if you have a bunch of conditional weapon damage buffs where it's like you have to be above 70% health or whatever. That'll keep you above that threshold for those. So I'll use this one a lot of the time if it's like a really hard dungeon, or if I'm just not using a bullseye weapon as my secondary. So I'll usually swap this out for that, or I'll swap like the deviation one out for that or something. But these are like the ideal cradles, and you can mix and match some of these too, don't get me wrong. Now for the food. Okay, so for food, my favorite food overall for this build is either crumbly bread for the extra weapon damage, stargazy pie for the extra crit damage. These are like my favorite 2 food items in the game, pretty much all I farm for and make. And then a whimsical drink, that is very good for this build or for other elemental builds because, I mean, 25% extra status damage, that's pretty insane. And then I also carry around a bunch of beer or malt ale or corn ale. And I'll usually run the bread and beer. That's like my go-to for almost everything. The only time I'll throw on the whimsical drink or stargazy pie is if I'm running like Leah or I'm trying to do something crazy on like a Prime Wars or whatnot. And then I just, whenever my stuff gets full, man, I just, you know, make some sort of soup or porridge. That way it doesn't get rid of the effect of your good food. It won't get rid of it. See? Yeah. Anti-gravity milkshakes because you can carry as much building materials and missiles for Prime Wars. Super helpful. And then another really good cheap damage food if you don't have end-game stuff for like crumbly bread and stargazy pie or whimsical drink, you don't have those deviant plants farming, is the shellfish meat because that's like bullseye essentially. And you're not even having it to proc bullseye, it's just hitting them. It's basically adding that vulnerability effect. So hitting enemies grants vulnerability plus 5%, bullseye grants 8%, so it's 3% less damage. But it's still really good. You know, an extra 5% on everything you hit for 10 seconds. And like, say you're running like a bounce build or an area of effects build, you just have to smash a room of targets and they all get hit and boom, they're all debuffed and take more damage. So that's pretty good. I like that for cheap stuff. And for my deviant, I didn't even think about that. For my deviant, I use the dog. I use the wolf deviation, the lone wolf's whisper, because look at that. Increases weapon damage received by the attack target by 43.2%. It's only like a level 4 or 5 wolf or something. I think it's level 5, level 3 or something. I can't remember. I'll go look here. But that's really good, and it also tanks for you too, and it duplicates every time you know you eliminate an enemy. It'll duplicate, it'll clone itself, and you'll have like a pack of these things just doing insane damage and aggroing the mobs and wiping out whole rooms of enemies real quick. And your wolf's damage is based upon like your psi and stuff like that. So like I've had it where I'm in Leah and my wolf is doing like 30,000, 40,000 damage per bite, and I'll have like a pack of them all attacking a boss and they'll just instantly kill it. It's pretty awesome. Another really good one is like the butterfly. If you're hitting weak spot and you're doing like a weak spot build and you're not running the this one, because it doesn't give you weak spot damage. But yeah, so I'd definitely recommend the wolf for this one. Or I'd recommend like the new gel with the damage bonus, elemental bonus upon reload or something, because this build can be kind of squishy. What was I gonna look at? The wolf. Okay, so the wolf. Yeah, he's 5 and 3. So I don't know if the activity rating is higher if you would do more damage, but it's at 43.2 right now. Oh, and for the ammo. Okay, yeah. Gear. Accessories. Bam. So for the weapon mod, we didn't even talk about that. This is another one that's very interchangeable. I use Shock Rampage because dealing damage gives you an extra 5% Power Surge trigger chance when you deal Power Surge damage. And since you're essentially dealing that, you know, you're proccing it almost every single shot, 5 pellets, high proc rate, bam, proccing almost every single time. So because of that, that is a very good mod to run because it's just going to keep stacking that trigger chance, and it's already up really high. It's already at 70% trigger chance just on the gun's effect, so you don't necessarily need it, to be honest, but if you want it to trigger nearly every single time, then this will guarantee that. But another really good one is Static Shock, because again, power surge damage plus 20%, that's really good. That's every time it procs, it's an extra 20% more damage, and you don't even have to worry about this power surge status duration because on the gun's description it does not trigger the actual like status effect. it just does like the damage from the ultimate of it, and so you still get that extra 20% damage, but you know, you don't have to worry about the negative of this mod, whereas it could be a negative on like the outsider or the outer space build, but not on the AA12. And they're both really good. I mean, you can use either or. It's honestly a dealer's choice. This way, you'd probably get a little bit more damage, but I don't know, because this way is more consistent damage, so I guess it really depends. I'll have to test them more. They're both pretty even when it comes to testing the numbers, though. But if you did a pure elemental one, I would definitely run the other one, probably for the damage. Because you'll probably, if you're doing an elemental build, you'll probably be running the Mayfly Mask, and that'll give you all the procs you need, so you don't really have to worry about the Power Surge trigger chance. You probably want more damage. Now for the attachments, I'm going for accuracy, because accuracy in this game, it like increases your spread the lower your accuracy. And so like if you're running the extended break plus 15 accuracy, that one's 14. This one's 15. So if you're running that and then you're running like the laser sight, so you know, plus another 19 accuracy, you're gonna have way less spread. So you can actually like pick people off at a distance this way. And if you're doing like center mass, less pellets are going to be, you know, missing off to the side. If you're doing a weak spot build and you need to get all those pellets hitting that weak spot, this is better for that. But ultimately, I mean, you can really use whatever you want for the attachments, because for this build you're going to be running up and in everything's face for the most part, so it's not that huge of a deal. It's just kind of like good to have if you're trying to snipe or shoot snipers and whatnot, or you're working on like having a tighter grouping for weak spots. And then for the ammo, I mean, you can use whatever you want, dude. I use tungsten shotgun ammo because I can craft it pretty cheap and efficiently, and I don't really have the need for more damage because, you know, an extra 5% for spending a bunch of source, no thanks. Maybe if people are struggling with damage on Leah for certain builds that might not do as much damage or something, hell yeah, I'd definitely use that. I have used that for other ones that are more support. Oh, and yeah, the magazine, that's bound. So, yeah, have fun with the 8 million hour reload time. It's not that bad, but if you invest into mods that have good reload, then it'll help. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for everything. And like, you can mix and match the attachments, you know, you can mix and match the Mayfly mask with the gas mask hood. You can do different mods for like the weapon or the mask or the hood. I mean, it's totally up to you, man. And then the blue one, not everybody likes to use blue ones to get the extra damage, but I definitely do that all the time on a lot of builds. On some of them, I'll even have it for like a couple mods, but I wouldn't recommend going crazy with it because you'll be losing out on a lot on all the substats of the golds. And yeah, that's basically it. And you can always you can pair this build with a bunch of turrets, drones, and your dog, and you'll have your whole army while you're sitting there wiping everything in just a couple shots. So it's pretty nice for Leah and ads and whatnot. Alright, well, if that was helpful, feel free to like and subscribe and stay tuned for more videos.